Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to preserve the oral history of Wadsworth for posterity. And today we have a very special reason for wanting to preserve the oral history of Wadsworth for posterity, in that we're going to preserve it for the year 2000, specifically for the year 2064, when Wadsworth celebrates its 250th anniversary. We just finished celebrating our 200th anniversary, and we're now going to put on tape, or actually on television, or on whatever those things are that record our history. We're going to do that so that when the time capsule is opened in 2064, they will know what we did in 2014. And our special guests today are the people who really are the backbone of what happened in 2014, starting with Mayor Laubaugh. And incidentally, for those of you in 2014, Mayor Robin Laubaugh was the first female mayor in Wadsworth's 200-year history. She and two of the other people from Wadsworth, be Jack, this is right over here next to Robin, is Jack Ollom, who was a co-chair, and Jack in 2014 was the head of the executive secretary of the executive. What are you, Jack?
I don't know. Probably the executive director of downtown Wadsworth.
Executive director of downtown Wadsworth, and next to him is Roger Havens, who is the principal of Lincoln School in Wadsworth. However, his function during the Bicentennial was to write books, and he did several of those, and also took care of many countless details. Now I'm going to have each one of them tell you just a little about herself and then himself, because I think that we need to know who this person was who was in charge. Mayor Robin Laubaugh, very dear, wonderful person. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself, and what you don't say, we will add.
Okay. Well, I've been a resident of Wadsworth since I was 4 years old.
4 years old?
4 years old, yes. So
You're not going to tell us how old you are now, though.
I will. I have no problem with that, because sometimes people, actually the third graders always ask me, but I'm 53 right now.
You're 50,
so I've been here a long time.
53 years old.
53 years old.
So you'll be, 50 years from now, you'll be 103 years old.
Yes.
And it's a good possibility that you could still be living.
Well, you know, I don't know. I'm not counting on that, but.
Well, I'm 84, so I would be 134 years old in 2064, and I still might be living. You never can tell.
You just may be. But yes, moved here and obviously went through Wadsworth City Schools, and eventually made my way back here after college, and raised our family.
College?
Went to Brigham Young University.
Brigham Young University,
yes.
Wonderful. And you majored in?
Finance. Finance, yes, and came back, and we started my husband and I, we started a little financial planning consulting practice.
Tell us who your husband is.
Brian Laubaugh.
Laubaugh.
We have R&B Financial Consultants, and it's located in Wadsworth. He's in the Evner building. He leases space there, but it's been a wonderful ride. But we raised our family here, and along the way, due to much community involvement, I eventually became involved with City Council, and I served on City Council for 10 years, and then after that I ran for mayor, and so this is actually my 8th year as mayor, and I had the opportunity or a happy blessing to be able to be mayor during this very momentous time.
Well, you surely picked the right time to do it, and you did a beautiful job in everything that you did, and so did the other two people that you assigned to help you with all of the details. We'll come back to you in a couple seconds, but Jack, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been here all my life, and
how many lives are that? How many years of that life is it?
Well, I graduated in 1969 from high school at Wadsworth, and I'm currently 64. I'll be 65 this December.
Wow.
So I've been here what are you looking at? I've been here a little bit. Currently, for the last 10 years I've been the executive director of downtown Wadsworth, and
Tell us what downtown Wadsworth is for the people in 2064.
well, downtown Wadsworth is an organization that tries to integrate the local businesses in the community, and we try to do it in the downtown area. The center of the city has always been the heart of Wadsworth, and we're an organization dedicated to making sure that it is lively and vibrant and continues to do that. And this time, 2015, cities are starting to dwindle. We don't use our city downtowns like we've always used them. Historically, everything was located there, and you had to go there to get everything that you needed. And that's not the case anymore with the technology and how things have evolved. So not just Wadsworth, but lots of cities face the same thing, where things have moved out of the cities, things have changed drastically. How do we do business, how we bank? The internet has played a huge role in that. And I think that I view it kind of as a pendulum. You know, I think it'll swing one way and it'll swing back the other way. There's a big move on now to have shopping areas emulate downtowns, and people like the atmosphere of a downtown. They like the coziness, and our size town, I think, to my mind, is just the right size. Currently, we're at 22,000. Is that
Correct.
depending on who you talk to, I guess, 22,000. So we look at that as still the center of the city, still the heart of the community.
Heart of the community. Well, and again, we'll come back to you about what your role is as the downtown Wadsworth person in presenting so many of the activities that we had down here. But let's go and let's find out who that man at the end is.
I'm the man in red.
Your man in red.
And but I'm currently the principal at Franklin Elementary School.
What did I say?
Well, earlier you said Lincoln. I was principal at Lincoln and Franklin for 11 years, but currently my base is at Franklin. And I was born in Wadsworth and was raised in Wadsworth, graduated from Wadsworth. Student taught in Wadsworth, taught 5th grade in Wadsworth, and principaled in Wadsworth, and that's. I have been eating
Have you ever gone to Barberton?
No, never Barberton. That's why I'm wearing the red, just to distinguish that. But since 1st grade, I've been eating school lunches, and I've never stopped.
Never stopped. That's wonderful.
So I guess that's my claim to fame.
Now, are you going to tell us how old you'll be in 2064?
Well, I won't tell you my exact age because I can't do that math in my head, but I can tell you that I probably won't be active on the 2064 committee, but people can always write me letters and maybe I can correspond that way. But anyway, other positions in town is I serve on the board of downtown Wadsworth. I serve on the Scholarship Foundation of Wadsworth board, and I'm also active in the Historical Society. And
You're the president of this historical society.
I just became president of the Wadsworth Area Historical Society, and I'm president of the Isaac Walton League of Wadsworth, and so I've kept active in these community events to just give back to the community that's given to me all my life.
Wonderful. Now, as promised, we're going to come right back to the mayor. This did not start in 2014. When did it start, and what did you do, and what did you have to do to get the whole thing rolling?
Well, I would say the first discussions actually started with these two to my left. Roger being so involved with the Historical Society, and his love of Wadsworth and downtown, and Jack's involvement and love of downtown as well as history. The two of them started putting bugs in my ears. They said, Robin, you know, you might want to give some thought because we've got a big year coming up. You know, 2014 isn't that far away.
When did that happen?
That was in 2011.
2011, 3 years beforehand.
3 years beforehand. In fact, I think they might even start in 2010, but I kind of pushed them off a little bit. But 2011, I started paying attention because I realized as well that this was going to be a tremendous opportunity that we wanted to make sure that we gave special due to. And so the three of us got together, and I said, well, I can't, you know, I'm a mayor. I don't have all the wisdom that you all have. I need to have help here. And so the three of us talked together, decide what would be an appropriate thing to do. We recognized that downtown would be heavily involved because that's our gathering place. It's a place that we all like to meet and come together as a community. But we also recognized that we wanted this to be a citywide event. And so for that purpose, we thought we needed to reach out to throughout the city to be able to get individuals, organizations, businesses, clubs to come together as one to see what would be a good way to memorialize this 2014. What did people want to do?
That was a good way of putting it,
Yeah.
to memorialize it.
Yes, and so actually I looked it up. It was June of 2011. We sent out our first letters to area businesses, organizations, and clubs and individuals, asking them to come and meet together as a group. And we met in City Hall council chambers. We had probably 50, 60 people there that day.
At least that many. Do you remember what date that was that they all came?
I've got it, but I don't recall the exact date. But it was early September, I believe.
Early September,
yes.
I believe it was. That's
And
right.
we had representation from organizations such as the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Rotary Club, Kiwanis, Lions Club, Chamber of Commerce, the schools, just really stakeholders,
And
groups
some
of
private citizens.
private citizens, individuals that had interest in Wadsworth, and we knew that they would like to be involved or have some sort of a say. We had a couple meetings, and from those meetings we gathered the thought that individuals wanted to be, instead of just a celebration of one day or even 1 week, it would be more of a celebration of a year, to really celebrate the entire year, our bicentennial. And by having it throughout the year, we were able to perhaps promote things that there would be something for everyone because it's hard to pack all that in one day or one weekend. And so that's where it all began, really.
Now, when you say that we did this for an entire year, we actually started in March 15th, is that correct?
That's right.
And why did we choose March?
Well, let one of the others maybe mention that.
Well, the man with the red shirt probably could answer that one just as well.
Well, I think everybody with shirts on here today could answer that. But, we chose March as being, that is the actual time that back in 1814 the original pioneers set foot in Wadsworth Township and started building their log cabins on March 1st, and the official day of reckoning was March 17th when they moved into their log cabins. And so we know that through the history books it says that during the other centennial celebrations they discussed about kicking off things in March. And we know that March's weather can be pretty unpredictable.
It can be.
And it was unpredictable for the first pioneers. So we said, let's give it a go. We'll be the first ones to do it in March and try to stay with that, to keep true to the actual founding of Wadsworth. And as you know, last winter, was one of the harshest winters of all times. And as the March approached, we crossed our fingers, and fortunately for us, the skies opened up and the weather held, and the end of that terrible winter was over with, and people pretty much climbed out of their houses and came to that first celebration night.
That's right, which was on March 15th.
Which was on March 15th.
Very close to March 17th.
There was snow earlier in the week,
That's right.
and we were sweating bullets. Roger's being calm, but it was very.
It was a bad.
It was bad during the week, but it really did. The sun came out, the pavement was dry. And
Well,
it was
the mayor had trucking the snow out of, out of the downtown. I mean, really, they literally were trucking
Tons
the
trucking
snow
the
out.
snow out of
Snow.
town.
earlier in the week. It
Being
was,
removed from
it
downtown,
Was, it
yes.
was
Now,
amazing.
the March 15th then was a beautiful day actually, and it was cold, very cold. We had, I would say, 30-degree temperatures, maybe 40 degrees at the very, very tops, but it was very cold. But we had approximately how many people came down to what we called opening night, or opening day, or opening night. How many people do you think might have been down there? I made an estimate, and I usually do it by hundreds. Let's see how somebody else thinks.
Yeah, this is a tricky, when you can't gate, it's very difficult because people come and go, but I thought somewhere in 5,600.
Because they came throughout the evening. It
Yeah.
wasn't just, we had the ribbon
Right.
cutting, but then they came throughout the evening.
They came throughout the round, that's right.
And then we ended with fireworks, so.
So then the fireworks were actually resplendent, weren't they?
You mentioned it was
Wonderful.
cold, but you didn't mention there was 35-mile-an-hour winds too. So
Yes, there were 35-mile-an-hour winds. It was very, very cold. Roger, what would you say that the attendance was at that time?
I would say it was close to 5,000, and it was, as they say, difficult to gauge. People came in and out of the various stores and venues at different times. So when they were coming in and out, others were going in and out, and it made me very nervous at 8 o'clock when we were scheduled to do the fireworks, and basically the streets were empty, and that was disappointing until the fireworks started, and everybody streamed out of the stores and every place where they were trying to keep warm, and it filled the streets again, and that was truly impressive then. So. And like I say, that was probably the most nerve-wracking, is seeing that no one stuck around for the fireworks and nobody's there. But then, right when they heard the first boom, everybody flooded out of the stores and basically filled all of College Street and High Street.
Which, of course, would pretty well substantiate your 5,000 person figure. Actually, I've had a fairly decent record of being able to predict how many people are in a certain spot, because many, many years ago, when I was in the service actually, we learned that every human being takes up approximately 1.5 square feet of space. Now that's soldiers, but I think that these people were a little closer than soldiers actually.
They're trying to keep warm.
They're trying to keep warm. And I did the math as quickly as I could, and I came up with approximately 5,000 to 6,000 people as well. So I would say that, for the record, we can say that about 5,000 people came out that night. And then the mayor indicated a few minutes ago that we did a lot of things for different kinds of people, and we're going to be able to identify some of those things probably at this point. What followed the first night?
If before you go on to that,
Okay.
if I could just mention a few things that were occurring on first
Okay,
night.
that's a good point. Good point.
Because I think because it was our first event right out of the box, the concern, or the interest was, I should say, was that we would have something that would really set the stage for the rest of the year. So a lot of emphasis was put into that. And we're fortunate downtown because we do have several venues that could accommodate a good number of people. We had the library, we had the Strand building, which had an open theater gathering area. We have OJ Work, which was potentially going to be used if the weather was not cooperating with us. We actually used the square for a band that included Michael Stanley, which is he's a very recognizable, particularly in our region, individual. And so we had OJ Work Auditorium as a standby in case the weather was so inclement that they weren't able to perform, but they were able to perform on the square. We used our Lutheran church, we used City Hall, we used area in a building that was being renovated downtown that had some open space. We used St. Mark's Church. I'm trying to think of the other areas that we used, but these areas, City Hall, but they all contained activities that were going on that held all these individuals, along with all the businesses that were open. So that was a wonderful evening to gather everybody together. We started off with a ribbon cutting, and we basically cut the ribbon for the events for the entire year.
Who cut the ribbon?
I believe that was myself, but I was also accompanied by these two gentlemen.
That's right.
And we had a very important figure with us as well that day, General Elijah Wadsworth.
Oh, that's right, absolutely.
And General Elijah Wadsworth happens to be sitting right next to me.
Right.
And you played a very important part the entire year.
Well,
As far as we know, that was the first time Elijah set foot in Wadsworth, wasn't it?
Yes,
True.
Elijah Wadsworth never came to Wadsworth,
Yeah.
so far as we know. Now, one of the things that is saddened to have to mention at this point is that all of the things that you just mentioned, all of the places that you just mentioned, may not be here 50 years from now. So, Jack, your job tonight is, or this afternoon, this morning, is to identify where those are geographically. Let's start with City Hall, the St. Mark's Church, the library, OJ work, and so forth.
Okay, well, City Hall currently resides on the northern section of what we call the proper downtown. What's the address?
120.
120. Maple.
Maple Street.
The library is on the eastern quadrant of the square, roughly between Lyman Street and situated on Broad. St. Mark's would be on the western quadrant of the square, on the corner of Pardee and College.
And tell us a little bit about St. Mark's history.
Well, St. Mark's history, first off, at this point as we're taping this, that's the only building that's on the National Register that I know of for the area.
Why?
Why is it the only building?
I mean,
Why is it so unique?
What makes it?
Roger, you want to go into the history of St. Mark's Church? It's a long one.
Well, it's on the National Registry of Historic Places, and maybe that's a clarification, and done so because of its historic value, its maintained, its distinction, and its originality since it was built in 1841, 1842.
As what kind of church?
And it was originally built as a Presbyterian church, but it was always known as a Congregational church in the beginning. So when I read the history, when it changed to Congregationalism must have been shortly after it was built, but originally that's the way it set out because the first pioneers that came to Wadsworth followed that faith. And later on they basically moved away or died out, and that's when the Mennonite church purchased or at least the Mennonites purchased the facility there, and they moved into the church until I believe it was the 1950s when the Mennonites built their new church out on Treese Road, and at that time it was abandoned for a while until St. Mark's congregation, the Episcopals, purchased the church.
Now,
so it's almost gone like full circle.
So that we have a fairly decent idea of what the Mennonite influence was. That church was what they call the first Mennonite church. There are 3 different Mennonite churches at this time in Wadsworth, or there at least were when we celebrated. And one is the Maple Hill Mennonite Church, and then Bethel Mennonite Church, and the First Mennonite Church. There are 3 different congregations, and this one was the First Mennonite Church, and the first minister was then Reverend Ephraim Huntsberger. He came from Pennsylvania, Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, County, Pennsylvania. So we have the 3 different kinds of Mennonites here in Wadsworth. Now, what about the high school? What about the OJ work? Tell us about OJ work and why do we call it OJ work?
You asking me?
Yes.
Okay. The OJ Work Auditorium and what we call the Central Intermediate School, located on the southern quadrant of Main Street. The auditorium, I'm not sure exactly when they dedicated it to OJ. Was that in the 60s, I believe? OJ Work was a principal, teacher, and I should back up. That was the high school up until about 1964, I think it was. So that served as our high school. OJ was well liked. I'm not sure exactly when they dedicated the OJ Auditorium to him. but he was one of several, as Roger will probably fall into that category, memorable educators that we had in this town. This town has always had a big influence on religion and educators. And I wanted to back up just a second on St. Mark's. St. Mark's is virtually unchanged with the exception, I think, the Iron Cross they took off the top of the steeple.
And the windows.
Yeah, and the windows. And other than that, it's
And they added a basement.
Well, that's true. They added a basement. But other than that, it's literally unchanged. So that's kind of, there was, let's see, there was no other, oh, we had to talk about the Lutheran Church, which is an addition to, but it's a community room that they utilize now, and it's a wonderful addition to that church. It's a big room with a stage on it, so that it really helps in the downtown and as far as meetings and gathering places.
You know, we can sit here and probably talk forever with there's so much knowledge that we have. And unfortunately, I don't know how many minutes we've been talking so far, but maybe someone can give us a clue of where we are in terms of in terms of the number of minutes we have left. But I think it's very important that we identify for the people in 2064 exactly where these things were. Now we have an entire year ahead of us. So Mayor, how about you once again telling us some of the other kinds of things that we did, and they don't have to be necessarily in order,
Sure.
but there are several other kinds of things
You
that
bet.
we did as well.
Well, we started with it. We called the event First Night, which we've already discussed a little bit about. And then we, another one of the very early events that we had was the historic speaker series. And the speaker series was wonderful. We had them monthly. And basically we had, in fact, you were one of the speakers.
I was the first one?
Yeah, you were the first one, and gave a wonderful description of streets and prominent individuals in the community. And that was a wonderful program. But we had those programs throughout the year. We also had historic teas. And those teas were held in prominent homes throughout the community, homes that were recognizable, and certainly those were very popular because individuals had an opportunity from the community. They had an opportunity to view and even tour the home, and then they were able to hear a special speaker of some sort and sample on delicious items that were customary to 1814.
1814.
And so those were very well received, and those were held throughout the summer and into the fall.
Robin, how many teas did we have? About 12 or 13?
No, not that many.
No?
I think we had about 6. Was it 6? 6 teas?
I believe so.
I believe.
6 of them.
But
okay.
they were wonderful, and as I said, were well received. We also had our Women's Club sponsored a wonderful program where they had individuals that were women of our history,
Right.
and they had individuals depicting those prominent women. One of them was Myra Johnson, which was from our historical society. We have her home that we now have our historic items placed.
She was a physician.
Physician, yes, but many prominent women were featured in that particular program, and they actually performed that at other times as well because that was so popular. We had an event in the summer. Of course, we celebrated with Blue Tip. We have a Blue Tip Festival Week.
Tell us about Blue Tip, which may or may not be extant in 2064.
Ah, true. Well,
We're the home of the Blue Tip match.
that's right, that's right. And in honor of that Blue Tip match, we have an annual parade. And from what I've been told, it's the second largest in the state of Ohio.
I've heard
Takes
that.
about 2.5 hours, I believe, from start to finish.
And it takes 2.5 miles to walk it, and we've all walked it.
Yes, yes. And so for this particular one, because of the Bicentennial, we had Bicentennial featured at the beginning. I rode in a beautiful Oldsmobile, a 1904, I believe.
1904 Oldsmobile,
1904
right.
Oldsmobile. And we had several other beautiful historic vehicles that we were driving in.
And the the leader, or rather
The Grand Marshal.
Grand Marshal was a woman.
Ramona
And who was it?
Wanoff.
And why was Ramona the Grand Marshal?
Well, I'm going to let Roger mention
Roger,
that one.
let's tell us about why Ramona was the Grand Marshal.
Well, I believe she was the descendant of one of the very first pioneer families.
Right, the Dean family.
The Dean family.
Yeah.
And should they have had a continuous line from 1814 to the present day.
Yeah.
And she's the oldest the oldest living in Wadsworth. She's not the oldest survivor. Her aunt is the oldest survivor, but she lives in Medina right now.
Mm-hmm.
So since Ramona was born in Wadsworth, the mayor thought that it would be a pretty good idea for us to do it that way, and it was an excellent choice. Again, another excellent choice that you made.
She wore a beautiful old-fashioned dress, and what was really nice is she was sitting right next to our own General Elijah Wadsworth,
Who was in uniform.
who was in uniform,
And
and you were on a float, which was a cabin, a log cabin that was built by actually, really, it was the Ross that were the ringleaders on that one, and they did
And
a
the
beautiful
temperature
job.
was 93 degrees. And I was in a very, very heavy, polyester?
Yes, yes.
Polyester uniform, and it was hot.
Yes.
93 degrees.
We were all melting. We were all worried about that our 1904 and 1910 vehicles, whatever years they were going to make it.
Would boil over, that's right, exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Now, actually, Jack, you were in kind of a uniform too, and so were you, Roger. What were your uniforms?
We were in period dress, or what we hoped to be was in period dress. Having being part of the Bicentennial co-chair, I was right behind Robin. I noticed that her vehicle was leaking fluid. I was hoping that they would get through it.
Which, as an aside, right at the end,
It did
when
break
died.
down. Yeah, it did.
It died?
I knew there was something serious. This was not good. I could see the whole parade route down.
What happened at the end?
It just died.
It died.
We turned into the area off of the path for the route, and because we had stalled, we had waited and had to park there just momentarily for others to get by. It stalled, and eventually I hopped in another car and we went off. And so I think he got out eventually. I don't think he's
Yeah,
still
it's
there.
still not down there. If you own a 1904 Oldsmobile,
Yes.
at this date and age, you certainly would not let that thing stay there.
No. But that was another example of the Blue Tip Parade was another opportunity for us to celebrate. We continued our celebration throughout the year. We had a celebration where we had a community picnic, where this one, instead of being downtown, we actually had it at our Memorial Park, which was really nice because Memorial Park is another beautiful feature in Wadsworth, and it allowed us to have an activity which was different from others that we've had. We were able to have kind of a pioneer type theme, and we had Indians, and we had pioneers, and we had,
Colonial Regiment.
Yes, that's right. We had a blacksmith there, and I'm trying to think. We had old-fashioned games. We had what was really fun, I thought, was the old-fashioned ball game. We had a men's old-fashioned game, and then we had a women's. We had it up our baseball diamond up at the northern part of the park, but that was really fun.
That lasted, what, 3 days?
Yes, 3-day celebration, and we had bands. We had Friday night was the band, and so it was just a great weekend and a lot of fun.
One of the things we tried to keep in mind all the time was that we tried to have events and things going on for everybody in the community, so that whether you were young or old or in between, new family, old family, there was something for everybody, and each one of those events kind of kept that theme going.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I think would be appropriate would be for Roger, since he's a school principal and he knows how to read, for him to actually read the list of things that happened in order. And you may pick up your paper and read from that. You don't have to memorize it. We'll test you on it later.
Okay, well, here's a listing of the 2014 Wadsworth Bicentennial schedule of events. Starting out March 8th was actually the first meeting, and that was Dr. Carino here, who gave a presentation on the naming of Wadsworth streets. And again, whether it's the Pardee Street and the Lyman Street and the historical significance behind that. Most of these streets, of course, were named after families in town. March 15th then was the Wadsworth first night, and again that was downtown Wadsworth in the evening on that was a Saturday, wasn't it?
Yes.
I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then we continued the historic speaker series, and again all these were in the City Hall council chambers at City Hall. And April 12th there was a lady who came in and talked about the traveling artist Ferdinand Brader, who incidentally I believe currently has his, they have his collection on display at the Canton Art Museum. April 25th was kind of the first tea as such, although I don't believe any tea was served, but it was the Spirits of the Past at the Johnson House, which is our Historical Society museum.
And where, tell us where that's located, please.
And that was located right in front of City Hall at the corner of Maple and High Streets. And then the historic, well, that had people dressed in period dress. They had entertainment, live entertainment outside, and it was kind of wet and cool out. But that held down the crowd a little bit, but everybody who was in attendance had a great time.
It's where you got to meet Abraham Lincoln, too.
And Abraham and his wife were there, as well as some other characters.
And then just so the people in 2064 don't think that we were living when Abraham Lincoln was around, he was actually impersonating Abraham Lincoln.
So that wasn't the real one?
That wasn't the real one.
Okay. Well, all right, so somebody impersonated him. I won't be able to sleep tonight. Okay, we continued the historic speakers on May 10th, where Charlie Ackerman described the Hard family. The Hards was, they were part of the first pioneering families that came to Wadsworth. And fortunately, there were two generations of the Hards that wrote their memoirs of daily life in Wadsworth. And I believe I didn't attend this one. This is one of the few things I didn't attend. And so he shared with them some of those items in those memoirs. May 14th, the mayor had a signing of our picturesque book that was created for this event. It was called Our Town, Wadsworth, Ohio, a hardback book. And our emphasis was not necessarily the history of Wadsworth, but more of a pictorial representation of the past and the present. So modern pictures, and we encourage you to purchase that book. Even 50 years from now, we'll still be collecting money. And in that case, then you'll see historic pictures of Wadsworth, but currently it shows many, many current pictures. And we were conscientious in putting the geographical locations of each of those pictures, knowing that someday that stores and businesses move sites, so we were pretty descriptive in their location, their current location. Then we, of course, had the Women's Club Historical Luncheon, where, again, the great women of Wadsworth gave a presentation at the Galaxy Restaurant, which is currently located at the north end of Wadsworth off of High Street, right along Route 76, Interstate 76. Then we had a Memorial Day. We were part of the Memorial Day Parade, and during that time was the dedication of the Boy with the Leaky Boot statue / fountain in the East Park. And East Park is that strip of land that's located on Broad Street that splits the lanes close to the center of town. And there's a whole story behind the Boy with the Leaky Boot, but I'll move on just to get through this calendar. We continued with the historic teas, and of course we started out at the historical house, and the second one was at the home of Michael and Jana Day. They live where Far Avenue dead ends off of Is it Crestwood?
Crestwood.
Crestwood, yes. And that house was originally built by a banker in town by the name of William Kane, yes.
C-A-I-N-E.
C-A-I-N-E. So anyway, during their tea at the Day's house, Marla Bianco gave a presentation on the historic homes of Wadsworth and did a great job doing that. And also on May 30th, we had a community night at Canal Park located in Akron, and the Akron Rubber Ducks baseball team played the Harrisonburg Senators. And the baseball team is, I guess you would call it
B-League.
Okay, B-League baseball. And then the historical speaker series continued on June 14th. I gave the presentation on a history of the Wadsworth City Schools. June 17th came up, Blue Tip Parade, which we just talked about earlier. Then we had a historic tea at the home of David and Dee Stewart, and they live on the corner of Highland and Boyer. I guess it would be the southeast corner.
Incidentally, could we interrupt just for a quarter of
Sure.
a second? The Blue Tip Festival brought in very close to 25,000 people. I mean, in the parade, right?
Yes, the parade was, and because of our additional floats and things that we contributed from the Bicentennial, it, I think, was a record, at least the time-wise, a record length parade. And so going back to the tea at the Stewarts, they also had Abraham and Mary Todd Lincoln, but as you say, they were impersonators, and because they've been long gone. Continuing the historic speaker series on July 12th, Joe Meyer came to Wadsworth. He now lives in Columbus, but he came back to Wadsworth and presented on the Wadsworth and the Erie Railroad, or the role that the Erie Railroad tracks in the south end of Wadsworth played in the history of Wadsworth. And Joe grew up in Wadsworth, and his father was a teacher and administrator in the Wadsworth schools.
And it's spelled M-A-Y-E-R.
M-A-Y-E-R.
It's pronounced Meyer.
Meyer. And then we had the next historic tea at Tony and Sandy Solero's house. Their house is a recently built house, probably within the past, 15 years?
So,
And so it wasn't a century house like some of the houses prior to this. And Jacqueline Kennedy, Onassis impersonator, gave the presentation, and she was the wife of John F. Kennedy, President of the United States, former President of the United States. And then July 25th, 26th, 27th was that community picnic that we mentioned earlier, or Robin talked about. And then we had a Bicentennial Bash on August 1st, and that was up here at the Suprema Senior Center and Cafe. And here is at the next to the Wadsworth High School off of Broad Street and Durling Drive. And then in August,
did anything auspiciously happen that day?
well, from what I remember, there was a lot of food and a lot of wet people by the end of the...
Any special wet people?
Well, there was a dunking tank, and...
Who got dunked?
And I didn't get dunked because I was working that day. I did come up to observe, but it seems like there was a mayor that walked away that was quite
Very wet.
Very wet.
And for some reason, they kept throwing those balls. So they just kept lining up, and
I wonder why.
I don't know. Employees, residents, my husband, everybody was lining up.
Yes,
Yeah,
as a matter of fact, we took issue with your husband. We thought
Yes.
that he should not have done that.
No.
And he
He
said
heard
that-
about it later.
He heard about it later.
Okay, and so then we had the Founders Day weekend celebration, August 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. And it started out, I believe it was Thursday night at our regular band concerts downtown at the gazebo, where we had the community band and the community choir sing, and then we had Caesar recognizing and identifying the relatives of the founding families of Wadsworth.
They had about 70 or 80 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there was quite a number of them, and that was very well attended, and a nice presentation given. Then another historic tea at the home of Joe and Susie Arpad, located on Woodland Avenue, just north of Durling Park. Mm-hmm. And that was the former home of Irvin Young. Irvin Young.
E.J. Young.
Not E.J., it'd be E.J. never lived. It'd be
No, I'm sorry, you're right, you're right.
Yeah. But anyway, one of the Youngs, and the Youngs, of course.
Irvin Young.
Irvin Young.
Yeah, Irvin.
E.J. Young was instrumental in getting the Ohio companies started up in Wadsworth, which included what we call the old injector, the match company, the box board, and the salt company. So anyway, we got a tour of their house and a presentation by the Grand Army of the Republic, which was the ladies of the Grand Army of the Republic, and they told me more about their garments and what they wore than I guess I cared to ever know in my life, but they did a fantastic job.
Oh, it was wonderful. Seeing all those beautiful dresses and different
and
things
the
they
layers.
wore.
I didn't
Oh,
realize
layers,
how
lots
many
of
layers, layer upon layer. All right, and moving on. So that weekend, we also, the American Legion, Post 170, Commander Joe Rogers, spearheaded a pig roast. And the Legion is located on Main Street between the
O.J. Work and
the CIS, the Central Intermediate School, and the square, where the gazebo is. And out in front, they had a cornhole tournament, and there were also activities going on College Street that included magicians and boomerangs and photo booths and video games, etc. And then we had students from the high school drama department dress up as prominent figures of Wadsworth, stood along the streets of downtown Wadsworth, and people moved from student to student or person to person, and they spoke about their history and how it connected to Wadsworth and how they influenced the history of Wadsworth. Then we had another historic speaker series that weekend, and Ralph Copley shared all his old postcards of Wadsworth. And then sidewalk sales went on throughout the downtown area. There was a kids' carnival with a petting zoo. There were food trucks, and then finally at noon, the time capsule was brought to the center of town and opened, and all the articles from 1964 were put on display. And we didn't talk too much about the time capsule, but it was buried in Woodlawn Cemetery down by the entrance, the original entrance on College Street, and that was exhumed in early March of 2014 and brought back to the Rossbert Funeral Home to be cleaned up and put in a presentable position. And so those items were removed during that ceremony.
Well, and one of the things we didn't mention about first night is, along with the ribbon cutting, is we also brought the, in grand fashion really, the time capsule was brought on an old carriage.
A horse-drawn hearse.
Carriage. Yeah, a horse-drawn, that's correct. Hearse. But it was really neat, and so the Rossberts, they wore their period clothing for...
Tops hats and all
exactly.
That,
that
Very
was really
nice.
neat.
So after the time capsule was opened and the contents were were placed on display in City Hall, the Wadsworth Library, and also Dave Cordis's watercolor studio on High Street. There was an antique car show. We did Lolly the Trolley tours where people could pay, and for $10 they were able to take a trip out through the countryside of Wadsworth and hear the history of that area.
And who led those?
Who led those? I rode in one of the trolleys and gave my rendition of the history of Wadsworth, and Jack Ollom did the other trolley, and we ran 3 sets of 2 trolleys.
And they were very well received. Lots of people enjoyed them immensely. I had a chance to go on one of those tours, and it was beautiful. It was wonderful. Learned a lot.
Yeah, me too. And we had a cemetery walk that evening where we had people out in our Woodlawn Cemetery.
And who did that?
Those were some of the same students who did the presentations downtown. They went down to the cemetery and stood next to the tombstone of the person they represented, and again gave a detailed account of their life's history.
Who wrote the script for them?
The students wrote their own scripts. I provided them with the information that I copied out of past history books, but I was very impressed in the fact that they wrote their own scripts. They learned about the person, and my emphasis was you put it in your own words. Take the words and now put it into a personality. And they did an excellent job.
They all wore period dress.
And they all dressed up, representing the person in the era of that time. And then that Founders Day weekend ended with a community church service in front of St. Mark's Church, and again located there on College Street. And that was very well attended, and afterwards they got to enjoy homemade ice cream and
Pie.
And pies. And I do have to add that the organ that was used to play the music was an old pump organ that was donated by the Methodist Church that they once used for their, I guess you'd call revival meetings or tent meetings and that type of thing, and that was donated to the Historical Society.
And Brenda
Adley, Brenda
Baldwin Adley played it. And who was the minister who presided?
And the minister was Pastor Moore.
James Moore.
James Moore. And he was a former pastor of the First Mennonite Church. Yeah. So other things, and I know we're getting short for time, but we also had a Wadsworth Community Day at the up in Cleveland, watching the Cleveland Indians as they beat the Houston Astros, and we all went up in chartered buses for that. Anything you could add to that, up to the baseball stadium?
Mm-hmm. You know, other than, what's interesting is a couple of these things we're carrying on. Some of the events that we did for the 2000, we're making them permanent events for the down. We're going to be doing it again this year. So
backed by popular demand.
Backed by popular demand.
Wonderful.
People in this town like to party.
Historic speaker series continued on September 13th with Paul Bixler, talking about the history of Bixler Electric, which has been a store that's been in Wadsworth now 100 years. I believe it started in 1914 and has been passed down from generation to generation. The Wadsworth Airport out at the intersection of Route 57 and Seville Road held a fly-in, and they brought a blimp over from Akron and landed it on the field and took off from there. That was kind of an added bonus.
And they had historical aircraft as well, and lots of food trucks as well. It was a very nice
and antique
event.
cars as well. And then the last historic tea took place, I believe that was the last one, at the home of Steve and Gail Williams at the corner of Woodland and
Farr.
Yeah. And there again, that was the historic home of the Everhard family. So again, looking at that as a century home. Then the schools got involved with the 2014 homecoming football game, and an old-fashioned homecoming parade was set up that left CIS and came down College Street and ended up there at the stadium. And prior to the game, many Wadsworth City Schools alumni could go out onto the field, and that was well received. And the last historic speaker series featured Bob Tubasing. And Caesar, you'll have to tell me.
Bob Tubasing was a son of a merchant here in town who had the Tubasing's Dry Goods. It was on Main Street, right where the VFW is right now, or very close to where the VFW is right now. And Bob was an artist for National Geographic, born 1921, so he was 93 years old when he came here. And they presented several of his artworks as well as some of his poetry, or some of his writings. Just an extraordinary person.
And seemed like he was an interesting character overall, especially
Well,
growing up in his
if there
youth.
were time, we could have a whole program on some of the antics of Bob Tubasing.
Okay, then on October 23rd, we had Thriller in the Square, and maybe somebody else can describe that.
Maybe Jack.
Jack.
Well, there's another one of the carry-ons that we're going to carry that on, but we piggybacked on top of downtown Wadsworth Scare on the Square, which was an annual event that basically the kids from the area come down and get candy, trick or treat, and then we have events, costume contests. There's always something for hay rides. We used to do a haunted alley, outdoor movie theater kind of thing, pumpkin decorating contest at the library. But it was based on the Thriller video from Michael Jackson. Alex McIlvaine and his wife worked diligently to train all of the dancers.
And his wife is actually the dancer herself. She's a professional dancer.
Right.
Actually. And she was Lori Hannah
Hannah.
McIlvaine.
And they did it basically like the video where they came out of the Strand. They started at the Strand Theater, the old Strand Theater, and came out and danced around the square to the Michael Jackson Thriller music. So it was it made several newspapers. There was a lady from Brunswick or someplace who had always, it was on her bucket list to do, and so there was a couple of stories done on that. So.
Okay, and so continuing in 2014, we get to October 26th, and the Men of Wadsworth, which was a gathering or a collection of men and young boys in Wadsworth who got together and practiced together in order to put on a vocal concert. And this chorus gave a presentation at the Trinity United Church of Christ, which is located on High Street, close to the corner, well, in between Boyer and Prospect Street. And again, that was given on a Sunday afternoon in the evening at 4 o'clock. I went to it. It was absolutely fantastic. November 22nd came around, and the Bicentennial Ball. And Robin, I think it's most appropriate for you to describe a little bit on what the ball encompassed.
Well, it was quite an evening. The ball was held at the Galaxy, which is a beautiful restaurant and banquet facility at the north end of the community. And it was a time where you could dress up in period clothing or come over in just cocktail attire, but gather, and we had at least 300 people there. It was quite a gathering, a sellout crowd. And Kay Bowman was the chairperson of that particular event, but they had quite a committee. I wanted to particularly mention one individual, Paulette Grubb. because Paulette is an artist, and she hand painted, along with others that helped her, but she was the organizer of it. But they painted these 10 panels depicting scenes from around town. And actually, because they're so beautiful, they were just meant to be temporary, but we just couldn't have them be too temporary. So right now they're on display at City Hall, and a couple of them are up in the downtown offices. But
You know,
beautiful.
actually, I was Paulette's principal
Oh, really? Oh, my goodness.
60 years ago.
Well, that event, you taught her well, because that
Oh, yeah,
event
indeed I did.
was beautiful, and the decorations were exquisite, beautiful flowers, but it was a wonderful event to come to gather. And once again, it offered a little bit of something different than some of the other events that we've had, that people could participate and celebrate the Bicentennial. Everybody got their pictures taken, and it was very nice.
Very nice.
Go ahead, Roger. I think you got the last event.
Well,
there.
the last event was December 22nd, and that was a community Christmas sing-along, and this was held at Bueller's, which is a local grocery store located out off of High Street in the north end of town on Great Oaks Trail. And they set it up in there where the community choir came in and stood on risers and started singing, and other people collected around, and before long there was 100 or so people there, Jack being one of them. I think you were the lead singer for one of the songs.
Actually, I got grabbed by the Salvation Army to ring the bell. So
Okay. So he started singing, and that's when the Salvation Army grabbed him and asked him just to ring the bell and collect the money. But
the community choir actually participated as well.
Yes.
Yeah, the community choir.
With Linda McNamara and
Linda
Brenda.
McNamara.
They led it, and Bueller's provided free refreshments for everyone, hot chocolate and cookies. And that was the end. I believe we still have one event left coming into the 2015 year, and that is the reburying of the time capsule.
Right. And that's one of the reason we're doing this program today, so that we can actually put this into the time capsule. And we're going to have to depend upon people like Jack, who makes a living with technology, to determine what kind of an instrument we're going to have to play whatever we put in there, because 50 years from now there may not be a device to use for playing whatever we put in there. What do you call those little things you put in the computer?
And the sticks, yeah. One of the things that we'll regress way back a minute when Robin and I and Roger and I think Harry Stark went down. We talked to Worcester, the city of Worcester, who had a bicentennial, I believe, 2 years before ours, and that's one of the questions that they grappled with is when they have a time capsule, how do they get that information to the next 50 years? We've seen in our short period technology jump all over the place, and so some of the things that we thought were standard recording viewing devices have gone by the wayside, replaced by different connections, different technology. And so there's some thought will have to be put into that as to exactly, if we do give them a medium, we'll have to make sure that the medium's player goes along with it, so that hopefully they'll still be using electricity 50 years from now, but
Never can tell.
you never know.
Never can tell. Never can tell. Robin, you know, with the people that you had in place, and I think that you identified some of these people, what were some of the extraordinary kinds of things that you can think of? And I'll give you an example of one of them. When we had the picnic, for instance, how big is Memorial Park? How many acres?
Is it 13 acres?
No, it's
Oh,
like
it's 100.
60, I think,
There's
60 to
some odd-
70,
some
something.
60 or 70 acres. We had people way over on the one side and people way over on the other side and so forth, and people walking back and forth. And yet, it didn't take long for who was in charge of that.
Judy and Denny Roth.
Judy and Denny Roth, within a matter of minutes, they figured out that some of the older people could not walk that distance. And they brought in what?
They had shuttles. They had shuttles for parking and
for everything.
But no, they did a tremendous job, and I know that you'll be interviewing in the future individuals that had were responsible for different committees and events and that sort of thing, which I'm thrilled that you are, because the one thing I wanted to make sure is that we give a little bit of opportunity to highlight those individuals that did so much for this year. It was exhausting listening to all the events, really, and activities that were put on this year. It was extensive, and without the volunteers that have put in so much time and effort, we certainly would not have had the event that we did, or the year that we did.
How many volunteers do you think you had altogether?
Well, in first night alone, they had over 100 volunteers.
100 volunteers.
Over 100 volunteers, and actually, I'll give a little bit of highlight to one of our committees, which was the volunteer committee, and Patty Haskins was in charge of that. And to tell you honestly, Patty had a very small committee. I think it was Patty. So she was getting those 100 volunteers, and obviously people were interested in helping and wanting to be a part of this, but nonetheless, the scheduling, and then as the year went on, after people had been volunteering quite a bit, it was maybe a little bit more difficult. But she worked with many clubs and organizations, churches, groups that would volunteer for this year. We had 5 committees. Volunteer committee was one of them, but another committee was the event committee. That was Pam Douglas and Tana Fliger were the ones that coordinated those efforts. Pam actually started off with us at the very beginning, and she did a tremendous job, as did Tana, ringleading the efforts throughout the year. So they worked with the chairman of each of those particular events that we were just talking about, and so that was a very busy year for them, and it started not just this past year, but the year before that, and so that was a tremendous committee. So we had volunteer, we had events, we had the publicity committee. So all these events, we had to get the word out somehow, and I have to give a tremendous amount of kudos to Joanna Perino, particularly because of her expertise with WCTV, our own public access studio. But also with her knowledge in marketing and her connections. She's an employee with the city, but she did a tremendous amount of time on her own volunteering. But because of her connections with the city, she knew who to call, and she worked tremendously with the press. And so her, along with Kathy Hall, did all the publicity for this event. And it's hard, as Jack will tell you, when you have a brand new event. It's hard to get people to know about it and to attend, and it takes years of having an event on an annual basis to get people to come. Well, here we had this first night event in March, and it's freezing, and we're thinking, how are we going to get people out there? But we used probably 20 different means to be able to get the word out, and that was, as I mentioned, Joanna was in charge of that, Joanna and Kathy.
I was really impressed. She doesn't live in Wadsworth, but she was able to communicate the fact that even though she doesn't live in Wadsworth, she has a tremendous love for Wadsworth. Of course, she works in Wadsworth. And then the other thing that impressed me was the fact that she had a special way of getting the message out, not only as far as the schematics of it were concerned, but the fact that the way that she presented it, it really, really communicated well.
Well, I'll even mention, along with that, we recognized that we needed to have a consistent way of presenting it visually. Right. We wanted people to see advertisement from the Bicentennial, that they would know, oh, this is the Bicentennial event. And quite honestly, I'll give some more kudos over here to Jack. Jack's business, Oz2 Design, was a tremendous effort in our publicity area, because they designed the ads and designed the information so that it would obviously prompt people to know this is a Bicentennial event. So it went everything from the advertisements in the newspaper to things that we sent out on email, and also to the banners that were hung outside. So it was a very consistent look, and I think was very well received by the public.
I'm glad you gave that to Jack, because that gave him something to do.
Oh, you know, he didn't have anything to do.
Yeah.
So we had those 3 committees, but we also had, in addition, we had what we called the Historic Education Committee. Another one of the goals of the group, when we had met with all the volunteers or with all the individuals in that first meeting, is we recognize that we want to have a good amount of investment towards the historic aspect, We also recognize that this was an opportunity to perhaps involve the kids and to make sure that students were aware of our history, as well as just the general public. And so there was a whole committee, and that was and the time capsule fell underneath that committee. But Roger Wright and Terry Menser, who's a member of our historical society, and then Roger Wright, who is within the school system, those two together were chairing that particular committee to make sure that we got that message out, and they were very instrumental in the pictures that we had that were put on downtown, as well as we have a website which we have a timeline on that communicated information to the public, and as I mentioned, the time capsule and other things. So that's what that committee did. And then lastly, all those events and activities, we needed money. We needed funds
really?
to be able to do that. And Lisa Jones and Beth Gunther were the two that were in charge of those particular aspects. They worked with securing funds on a corporate basis, as well as from individuals. And then they also did all the merchandising, from T-shirts and polo shirts and to stickers, and they sold the Bicentennial books that were produced, and the calendars. We had a Bicentennial calendar, and ornaments, Christmas ornaments, and so they did all of that. And as I mentioned, Larry Douglas was very instrumental because he was the treasurer, and so we kept him very busy because there was a lot of transactions with all that. But those are those individuals all made up the main Bicentennial Executive Committee. And then, as I mentioned, there were scores of individuals that worked with those individual committees to produce the activities that we had talked about and the events throughout the year.
Wow. It's actually fatiguing just to hear what you said. Jack, now that you, a moment ago you said that some of the things were going to be continued, even though we're no longer going to be celebrating our 200th anniversary. What are some of those things, and how are you going to do it?
Well, I know that the Chamber of Commerce is interested in taking on the ball, the community ball.
Oh,
so
really?
Hopefully
That's nice.
that will continue on. One of the big changes is that for years and years and years, the fireworks have always been fired off down by the stadium, Memorial Park, and for first night we launched them out of the cemetery so that everybody could come downtown and see them. And that's something that we're going to build on, and for the 4th of July, fireworks will be held downtown so that more people can see them and enjoy it, and we build on that. I mentioned the Thriller. That's something that's been added to the Scare on the Square. Downtown Wadsworth does roughly 13 major events a year downtown, and a lot of the events that we did for the Bicentennial was piggybacked on them because people were used to coming to them, look forward to them, and it really enhanced a lot of the events. So we picked up and we learned. We picked up people that we that we found function very well for the Bicentennial, so that we try to continue that on. But there were the other thing that Roger and I have been talking about is the tours, the trolley tours. I'd like to continue to work with those and do those. So that's just a small sampling, but
Baseball.
Yeah, the baseball.
oh, and the baseball game, yeah, of course. The Indians loved the Wadsworth folks, and way ahead of everybody else, they sent us a notification they'd love to have us back. So that's something we're also going to continue on. Tom Studmeyer heads that up, and they give us buses, they give us first pitch, they give us baseballs. So that's something that's pretty exciting, and they give us a pretty good price on the tickets too. So
all of these things are probably self-generating, that is, in terms of enthusiasm. And even though there are going to be some denials here, and the first denial is going to come from the mayor, because she always says that everyone else did it. We have to give you a lot of credit, Mayor, for what you did, because without that kind of forethought that you had, number one, and number two, the follow-through, which is even more important than forethought, this wouldn't have happened. We need to give Jack and the people who were working with the downtown people, and that's a huge, huge operation. You say you have 13 functions a year, so I guess you wouldn't have to have any extra work to keep you busy. Was that?
Yeah, it's interesting the amount of meetings that we had to go to. All three of us, we were constantly, because in order to try to keep this thing on the tracks, one of, or both of, or three of us had to go to these meetings, so to keep things coordinated. And it seems like every time we turned around, we were in a meeting someplace. So,
Roger, how many books did you write for the? I lost count.
Well, I wrote a third grade history book in the year 2007, and it's for all the third graders in Wadsworth and gives them a short version of Wadsworth history, something to connect them to the town. And all the third grade classrooms do a downtown tour based on things they read in the story, and they actually get to see those locations. So I did another one for fifth grade, for fifth graders, and it connects people in Wadsworth who went on to do bigger and better things, through whether on the national level or even the international level. So it connected local history to the history basically of the world and the nation. So those are two books that I did. I wrote a lot of scripts, I could say, the past year when we did the trolley tours and helping out with the scripts of the students when they represented historical figures and writing the history of the Wadsworth schools and that type of thing. But those
did
weren't
the
in.
Sylvia Beach book.
And, you know, and
Boy with a Boot.
Boy with the
and
Boot, yes,
Boy
we
with
could
the
start
Boot, yeah.
listing them.
So
Please
yes, I
help
guess
remember.
there's been quite a few scripts and that type of thing.
You were extremely instrumental in the picture book that we did. That took a lot of effort.
A lot of research on those photographs, yes.
That's what, I counted my fingers, that was 5 books. Well, what did you do in the afternoon then?
Thought about what the next book would be.
I've concluded he does not sleep. There's just no way.
No sleep. Roger, tell us a little bit about the Boy with the Boot. That's a good story that we need to have perpetuated as well.
Well, you know what? I think that's kind of a story in itself. Maybe it should be something we meet with Joe Rogers because
Okay, well, we'll have
they
a
were the
program.
ones who were pretty instrumental, and Dan Freeman, in getting that going. I just kind of walked into that one and helped them out with the story part of it.
Okay.
So-
Well, we'll have another program with just that then. I can't believe that the year is over. It went by so fast for all of us who participated from a visionary point of view. I would imagine, however, that you are probably saying the exact opposite. I can't believe that it took so long for the year to end because you were all so busy. But I think the city of Wadsworth owes you and the people in 2064 need to say to you, thank you for doing what you did, because now our job will be so much easier. We'll just take what you've done and do it again, and all the work is already done. Roger and Jack and Mayor Robin, thank you very, very much. This has been a wonderful experience, and one that we're going to hopefully be able to give to the new generation of people starting in 2064. And Robin, I hope that you're there to give it to them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caesar.
You're the only one young enough.
Ah.
Only one young enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you.